God's Word. Today we're going to be reading out of Psalm 42. As a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all day long, where is your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul. How I would go through with the throng and lead them in the procession to the house of God, with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. My soul is cast down within me. Therefore I remember you from the land of Jordan and Hermon, from Mount Mizar. Deep calls to deep. At the roar of your waterfalls, all of your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day, the Lord commands his steadfast love, and at night his song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? As with a deadly wound in my bones, my adversaries taunt me, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? Why are you cast down, my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God.
All right, how we doing, OCC? Hey. All right, a little bit of noise there. It's all right. It's fair. It's medium. Kidding. You guys are amazing. I haven't thanked the 11 in a while. I really appreciate, there's, at 9 o'clock, it is, you have to, it's just squeezing people in here. If Steve, who is the fire marshal here in Jacksonville Beach, came in here, which he does occasionally, and chastises me about all the people in here, he would be upset at the 9. But you guys have chosen to come to the 11, and I love it. I love 11 o'clock people. You wake up a little later, right? You got 2 cups of coffee in you. And Abby had a couple of cups this morning, if you didn't notice. She amazing. Can you believe she puts people to sleep for a living? I was like, man, she is good at waking people up, man. I'll tell you what. Man, I several years ago, growing up, I remember playing high school football, which is one of those memories. You think about that when you're watching football and you're in your 50s, and you always remember it like it was a lot better than it was. But I do remember very vividly growing up and experiencing two-a-days. And I don't know, any of the guys in here, two-a-days? Yeah. You didn't even say, I love it that they just raised their hand. And at 9, there was the deep voice, yeah, I remember two-a-days. That's because the way you have to say it, because you played football. But the two-a-days was not something you look forward to. You might act like it to your coach, I can't wait, two-a-days, Oklahoma drills. You did, but I did not like it. And I know you're looking at me like, he does look like he played football. I know that's kind of what you're thinking right now. I was very fast, but in a straight line. Very, that's just was the only way I could do it. Just they just give him the ball, and hopefully nobody will come at him because he's just going straight down the field. But in my sophomore year of high school, two-a-days hit, and then I remember getting home, and we had a pool growing up. It wasn't fancy, the vinyl ones, 12 feet deep with a diving board, which they don't allow anymore because attorneys are the devil. I'm kidding. I know there's attorneys in here. I'm just joking. But I remember there was this season in me and my brother's life where we just didn't, the late elementary and in middle school, we just didn't go in the pool. It didn't look great. There was some algae blooms, and my dad was always cleaning it, trying to get it cleaner, and it wasn't clean. And then he would yell at us for not cleaning it. And then it became, when we were 7th and 8th grade, I'm going to fill it in with dirt. Anybody's dad ever threatened them, we're going to fill that hole in with dirt. That's it. And then I remember my sophomore year, it was a rediscovery of awesome. Because I came home from, you had a break in the middle of the day and two-a-days, and the pool's there. And what do you you don't even realize that you want it that much. We're in Tallahassee, Florida in August. It's literally like Hades. It is so hot and humid. And I looked in the backyard, and I'm like, that pool looks tasty. And so I would go and jump in the pool and experience it with me and a couple of friends. And then by the time I was a senior, and this is no joke, half the football team would come over because I lived really close to our practice field at my high school. And people would just come over. And it was just like a bunch of stinky football players just floating in my vinyl pool. It was amazing. Very just like redneck dream. And my poor mom, she didn't ask for that. Like, it's like 25 guys just all coming over. Had just taken off their pads. Everybody smells horrible. And my mom was so sweet. She'd come out with like the biggest tray of hot dogs and like Kool-Aid, like for, sophomore, junior years. That's what heaven's going to be like, for middle school and high schoolers. It's like, hot dogs and Kool-Aid and a swimming pool. And it was like game on. And then she started putting like a bar of soap at the corner with some shampoo right there. And everybody I don't think I ever even jumped in my normal indoor shower for the entire summer. I just would go I was like, what are you doing? I'm going to take a shower. And I'd jump in the pool and scrub up. And it just became this wonderful luxury in my life. Like, the pool was it was this rediscovery of, we got a pool. It's amazing. But I remember something else about two-a-days that was a little different than the luxury of the pool. It was called the trough. Anybody remember the trough, like in two-a-days? Like, our coach, like, built it himself with the assistant coach. It was a PVC pipe with holes drilled in it, and then the hose was connected at the other end. And then, like, once a practice, you got to visit the trough because, back in the 80s, we didn't drink water. We didn't have an emotional support water bottle 24/7 that we cruised around with, 64 ounces. Have you ever seen Kyle Rader's water bottle? I'm like, bro, that is more the water than 3 humans can hold. Like, that is massive. We didn't have, I don't think I ever drank water before I was a sophomore. So we had this trough, but you knew, and during two-a-days, it was not, water was like, there was something in your brain, the way that God has made you, that you knew, if I don't drink this water right now, I'm going to perish. Like, you knew you were going to be that dehydrated. It was not a luxury, it was a necessity. And as Natalie was reading this psalm, that is what the psalm is about. It is what the centerpiece of the psalm, and it is not known clearly whether or not it's a psalm of David. It was written for the sons of Korah, the guys that led worship. And these guys knew what worship was about because they were the relatives of people that had disobeyed against God, and God just opened up the earth and it swallowed them all up. So they were like dancing because they were alive. But the essence of the psalm is so much like the Psalms of David that there's a group of many theologians that believe that he wrote it, but we don't have that evidence. But this is what Charles Spurgeon says, so I'm going to say it too. It says, although David is not mentioned as the author, this psalm must be the offspring of his pen. It is so Davidic, it smells of the son of Jesse. I mean, he just goes on to say, every letter is a mark that we should probably know that this is a Davidic psalm. Some people say it's an extension of Psalm 23 because we get this overview terminology of the valley of the shadow of death. But this particular psalm breaks it down. Like, all of a sudden we see in Psalm 42, this is what's happening in the valley. This is the actual expression. This is the turmoil that's inside of a human being as they walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And that's what David was walking through. For the second time, he had been on the run as a fugitive from Saul in the early parts. If you've been in this series, we've been looking at the Psalms from the positioning of David. So over half the Psalms are written by David. And then there's another group of Psalms that we don't know. They may be written by David, or they're referentially about seasons in David's life. So well more than half are either written by David or about David, and this is one of them. And this is referring to a second time when David was on the run from his own son. David had taken the throne, his kids had grown up. Absalom had grown up in the palace, David's son. And he had the curse that nobody ever wants. He was very tall and very handsome. And he believed his own press. Like, he was a lot like King Saul. But he was magnetic in a way that people just liked him. Like, people wanted to be around him. In fact, he had an entourage. Like, he liked to cruise around with 50 people. Like that's a whole different type of entourage. That's not like, Kevin Hart walks around with people. That is a whole different thing when you got 50 people cruising around with you wherever you went. And it says that he had the nicest chariot. I love that that's in the Bible because as a guy, that's kind of what we call everybody's car. It's like when somebody gets a new car, like, dude, nice chariot. That's what's up. So it's Absalom, he didn't have a nice chariot. He had the nicest. He would cruise, and it says he would cruise around town, and people would like, they're good. Look, here comes Absalom. He's in his sweet chariot, and he's got his 50 people. And he would stand in this kind of courtyard area out in front of the palace, and people would come to him because he was also very wise and ask him questions or bring him problems, and he would solve them. And people loved it. He would before they ever got to the actual courtyard in the palace. Absalom's out there kind of courting the people, and it says his fame was growing, and the people that loved him was growing. He would say things. If you read 2 Samuel chapter 15, you'll find this story and this cross reference to Psalm 46 or Psalm 42 in this section of 2 Samuel chapter 15 through 18. And it says right there in 15 that he said, only if I were appointed judge over all of Israel. And he would say it out loud. But the rumor that Absalom wanted to take over the kingdom didn't really get back to David until later on. Absalom eventually gains this large following and moves to Hebron, which was the old capital of Israel. And his following grows even more. And then word gets to David that your son, your very son, wants to murder you and murder everybody in the palace and take over. Like he believes that he should be king, that he's better equipped to do it. Now, think about the devastation that would be as a father to know your son, one of your boys, wants to kill you. It would be one thing if there was a rift in the family, but this is, I want to murder you, and then I'm going to come in and clean house. And because David did not want to confront his son, he was so just could not believe this was happening. And he also wanted to have anybody that would be caught up in this conflict spared. He left with some of his fighting men and all of his family, and he fled. And he fled to this place that David was familiar with, the Kidron Valley. It's known as the Valley of the Shadow of Death, or the Valley of Shadows. And I want to kind of show you where this place is that David ended up. So I know it's kind of a cartoony version of it, but that would be like David's kingdom, like David's palace. That's the kind of the Temple Mount area in Jesus' time, but this is the time of David. This is many years before. And if you look on the other side, you can't see it. It's kind of out of the picture on the eastern side. That would be the Mount of Olives. And in the center, so that where you see that kind of shadow off to the right of Jerusalem in the palace area, that's the Kidron Valley. There was a little stream seasonally that would run through it, but it was very dark. I mean, it was like you would look down, even in the daytime, you would look, and it was literally called the Valley of Shadows because that's what people would see as they would be on the southern end of the Kidron Valley, and they would look through. There was sections that almost looked black because they were so dark. I mean, a better picture of the Kidron Valley would be this. So that's as dust is dropping, it would just be this kind of dingy, and it didn't look full of life like the cartoon picture. It was known as a graveyard. People would, because it was dark and because a lot of people wouldn't go there, people would dump bodies. Like the bodies of poor people or people that were trying to, disappear somebody. That's where they would go. They would go into the Kidron Valley. There was a lot of ash. People burned things down there. Criminals hid there because nobody wanted to go there and nobody would chase them there. So criminals would hide out there. So then nobody would want to go through the Kidron Valley because they're going to get robbed, they're going to get beaten, they're going to get murdered, and they're going to disappear in the Kidron Valley. Not only that, the kind of the mystical, nightmarish way that they thought about the Kidron Valley was for 600-700 years when the Israelites, think about the time of Judges, Israel would be with God, and then they would all of a sudden start kind of fading away and kind of migrating into the pagan culture, and they would begin to worship their gods and be, in that particular world. And then, something would happen, their life would get terrible, they would repent, God would rescue them. Well, in that time of rescue, all of the idols that they had, they would burn them and throw them in the Kidron Valley. When they defeated an enemy that was pagan, they would take all of the idols, they would burn them in the Kidron Valley. So you got to think, there's some bad bougie-woogie mojo going on in the Kidron Valley. Like everybody thought, we do not know, you don't, for many reasons, spiritually and just if you want to live. Solomon would later say, if you go in the Kidron Valley, he simply said, you are going to die. So back then, before Jesus' time, nobody wanted to be there. So David, being a smart man, thought, if I'm going to flee and take everybody somewhere where nobody's going to chase, where are you going to go? He went to the Kidron Valley. But it was, even back then, extreme. There was a small stream that ran through it. You would not want to drink that. It's where sewage ran also. Everything from both valleys, from Jerusalem and from the Mount of Olives, everything would drain down into the Kidron Valley to make that stream during the rainy season. So it was, even today, and I just read an article in 2017, 2018, they are still trying to clean up the sewage in the Kidron Valley. I mean, that's incredible to me. These are real places. I think when we read the Psalms, there's times when I don't think we fully get our mind, wrapped around that these were real people that were experiencing real things. So I want to just set the stage for this psalm, because this is where this psalm is rising up from. This is where it's being written from, is being in the Kidron Valley. And what David realizes in this moment is beyond just needing the instantaneous, I need to get out of this situation. I wish that things weren't the way that they were. I wish God could reverse. There was a deeper, even if you heard the psalm, there's a deeper aching in David's soul and in his bones as he's in this valley, as he's suffering, obviously, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. He cries out and asks for something well beyond just, help me and get me out of the situation. Spurgeon says this, ease he did not seek. He wasn't looking to just get ejected out of his situation. Honor he did not covet. When you're in a situation like that, trying to stay dignified, trying to do, that all goes out the window when you're that desperate. He said, but the enjoyment of communion with God was an urgent need of his soul. He viewed it not merely as the sweetest of all luxuries, but as an absolute necessity, like a water to a stag. Not a luxury that you bolt on, right? Not a swimming pool full of water that you're just kind of like, oh, I'm glad I have it. But a trough where you're lapping it up going, if I don't get enough water, I might not live in the next 2 hours. That's a different vantage point to think about God. I mean, I was thinking about how we are, how we kind of live in, in the West and think about what it is to be a part of a church or to have a spiritual life. And sometimes I think, maybe is it possible that we see it as a luxury? We come in for an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half. We bolt on that whatever it is that we need. I remember being being 29, having my first kid and thinking, we should be in church. Be good. I want to raise my kids in church. I want to have my kids in youth group. Spirituality is a good thing. That's where the good people are. And it becomes like an appendage, a luxury. But when does it become a necessity? Because that's what we see through the landscape of Scripture, is that God's not like the thing that we add on to our life as we're the captain. In fact, the whole problem of sin that is uprooted in the Garden of Eden as you roll into Genesis chapter 3 is what? The idea that Adam and Eve started to see God as the answer to things that they might need as opposed to the center of everything they need. That's a whole different viewpoint when we think about this particular psalm. So it starts out in verse 1, as a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. So he's making this kind of this picture of how thirsty he is. And it's not this sweet, as the deer pants for the water. so my soul longs after thee. I mean, if you've grown up in the Southeast in the church, you probably sang that song, and it was very sweet. There's probably a girl that rolled up there to do some special music. If you came from the Baptist church, like I was in a Baptist high school, it's special music every Monday, and then there'd be one person that would be playing an instrument horribly, and then somebody would get up and, "Has the deer pants," but that bad. It was terrible. And we have this kind of sweet, no, this is the picture that David is painting here, and the sons of Korah is of absolute desperation, of a stag. I mean, I think when we say deer, it's just coming and has been chased and hunted and pushed to the point of death and needs water so bad and is in a valley where there is no water, and realizing, my soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? He knew once he got to the root level of desperation that's what he needed. And so for us to kind of get on the ground with this psalm and kind of wonder what God's doing is God gives us words. God uses the psalms so that when you don't know what to pray in the middle of things, God gives us the psalms to be able to, gives us words to the emotions sometimes. It certainly has been that for me. And so what we want to do is, number one, we want to drink it. And I think sometimes we don't know exactly what that means. Like, what does it mean to come to a place where God's available and we drink it? In verse 3, it's kind of bringing these things before God. My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all day long, where is your God? Part of drinking of the fountain of God is bringing everything you have and laying it before him, saying, I can't move without you. And part of David's expression is to say to him, to kind of say it to himself, like, where's your God? My friend Jack Wire used to say, everybody's got a committee. Like, you got that committee that sits on the one shoulder and the other, and they don't always agree. Like, you got sometimes the committee's telling you to go one way, and sometimes the committee's telling you to go another way. But the committee is always talking. And for David, the committee's going, where is your God? Have you ever been in that place? In some sort of valley. I mean, there's people in here that are struggling with cancer. I know people that are in the middle of relationship, just horrible situations. People that are moving to the other side of divorce and are devastated. I mean, I know that all across the spectrum, there's people that are walking through financial situations in our church. There always is. We often come in, shake each other's hand. Hey, brother, how you doing? We're doing good. Just watched the football game. It was awesome. But there's real hurt. I mean, to be transparent, even in a room that's this size, we have a small tribe here. There is a lot of pain, a lot of valleys, a lot of chronic pain physically for people. A lot of emotional loneliness that exists in the church. And it's coming to God and saying, expressing that, like, where are you? I think David's recognizing and saying, where are you? What's going on? That's what I need. In other words, I'm not feeling your presence right now. I'm feeling the gap in the distance. But in that distance, it's also revealing for David his need and what he was missing after all. Because I don't know that he was panting like a deer for the water when he was back in the palace. But he certainly is in the valley. I was, several years ago, I was going to a small church plant. We met in the YMCA in Riverside, City Hope. And the church band, I don't know how this happened. I don't remember how the pastor was connected with these people, but I don't know if anybody remembers the Drifters. I know if you're a little older, some of the younger people I don't know who those people are. I wish I could sing you a Drifter song. I'm not gonna. But the two of the members of the Drifters were in the band. It's so worship team. These people they just didn't have to practice. Like, they just do they know the songs? Well, yeah, we know the songs. Of course we know the songs. They were good. They were really good. When they showed up, like they were, and we were always amazed. I'm like, is that really that guy he played guitar for so-and-so? We got invited to, one Sunday morning when we couldn't have church, we got invited to an AME church downtown, and we wanted to have, relationships with all the different churches in the area. And me, Dan McFerrin, who hosts up here, my brother-in-law, and a couple other guys went, and then our keyboard player went with us. And we walked in. I stuck out like a sore thumb. Your AME church is a black church. Went in there, welcomed. I don't think I've ever been welcomed so warmly in my life. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. The energy and the life in that room was incredible. I will tell you this, though. Like, y'all complain about me not like going long. Like there, you better have some crackers in your pocket. Like, you better be, because you going to get hungry. Like, I remember thinking worship, it was like going, and people were into it. You better pack a lunch. And then the guy got up to preach, and he left our buddy, the guy from the Drifters, up on stage. He said, you ain't going nowhere, the keyboard player. And he'd never done it. He started kind of coaching him, like saying, hey, man, you know how this goes? Like, I'm going to preach. We're going to do this together. We're going to be one with the preaching. And the guy was like, I got you. He knew. He was like, he's like, woo, got it done. And it was such an amazing, beautiful experience. The every emotion, every cry out for God, everything that was happening, the gospel was preached so well. This guy led people up Mount Calvary to find the one thing that was going to matter in their desperate need. And I remember sitting with the pastor afterwards. It was about 3 hours later. He's like, you hungry for lunch? I'm like, yeah, it's 3:00. And we were all just curious, like, because no offense, but we got you people every Sunday. This was a different experience. I'm like, what does that, like, where's this electricity coming from? And the pastor just simply said, we come thirsty. And he said, and all we're doing is showing people where the water is. And I just was like, it just is a different mentality. It's a different mentality. When and the question is, sometimes we're not drinking it because we don't know. We have no idea that we're dehydrated. I remember in 2021, I'd gone back to the doctor for the first time in like 12 years. Like, I just, for whatever reason, just didn't go. And then people just said, hey, man, you're in your 50s. You need to get your oil checked. Like, you need to go in and see what's wrong. And I went in. My blood work there was several things that needed to be worked on. But he looked at me, and I'd had all these symptoms. A lot of you know I went through a lot of, like, some health stuff in 2021 that I'd had, when I was a younger fella in my 30s too, and it had kind of returned. But I had a whole new myriad of symptoms, like a bunch of other things that I couldn't explain. And so the doctor was looking at my blood work. He says, yeah, you got a few things you need to check. He goes, but do you know that you're dehydrated? And I'm like, no, I don't. I didn't know I was dehydrated. He goes, well, you are dehydrated. Like, you need to drink more water. And I'm like, I just don't. Maybe he goes, some people, your brain just doesn't tell you as much. Like, things are going on, like you're feeling one thing, and you're like, man, maybe I need an aspirin. Maybe I need X, Y, Z. What you need is water. Like, you need water. And so I was like, really? I had no idea that I was dehydrated. He's like, you are dehydrated. You need to keep it, and you don't retain it as well in your 50s either. So you're really dehydrated. And I'm like, I don't know if I've ever drinking water, really. I just don't remember. And then I became like a middle school girl. I got the biggest Stanley ever. I was like walking around with my new water. I was like, I couldn't go anywhere without it. And I started feeling better. And I say that to say, I think sometimes we got all these things that we're trying to figure out. Like, we're worried and we're dehydrated. And we don't know it. We think we know what we need, and what we need is the water, the living water. And I think sometimes we get like artificial versions of it. We try so many different things to try to fix the thing, the existential crisis, the pain that we're feeling. Or we'll put that burden on another human, and we'll say, they're going to be my water. And I can tell you right now, if you make somebody your water, you're going to dehydrate them. They were never meant to be the living water. They were never meant to be in that position. And we try to keep putting stuff in that space. And somebody needs to come along at some point and say to us, you're dehydrated and you need the water. What do you think Jesus was doing in John chapter 4? The woman at the well. If you don't know that story, Jesus is cruising around, and it was hot. And then noon, day sun. The disciples are like, we're going to get some lunch. And Jesus decides to not walk around Samaria, but go through Samaria. And he finds a woman that is getting water at a well at noon, which was an odd thing. But she was kind of a reject from her town, didn't have a great reputation, so she didn't want to run into people. So she's at the well. Jesus starts having a conversation with her. She's fascinated by the things that he's saying. And so Jesus says, why don't you go get your husband and come back? And she says, well, I don't have a husband. He goes, I know you don't. You've had 5. And the one you're living with now is not your husband. And it sounds, when you read the passage, almost like judgment. But you know what he was saying? You're dehydrated. You're drinking from the wrong well. You think these men are going to save you. They're going to rescue you. They're going to be the thing that make your life better. You have missed it. He said, you keep drawing water from here. You know what? You're going to be thirsty again. But I have living water, this wellspring to eternal life. If you drink it again, you won't get thirsty again. And she says, sir, will you give me this water? And what's Jesus talking about? Himself. He is the living water. He is the only way to not be dehydrated. But we have to know that we're dehydrated, because I didn't know. And certainly I think when we grow up in the Southeast saying, I went to church my whole life. I know people that have been to church their whole life, and they're the most dehydrated people I know. And they've never really had the water. And I want the water. I hear David expressing, sometimes we're angry, we're depressed, extremely driven, want to be successful, and we're this angst. And really all we are is dehydrated. We need the living water, and we need to drink it. We need to bring our pain, our anxiety, all of those things. The second thing you see in here, and I love this because I think this is a good practice for all of us, is we don't just drink it, we preach it. We preach it to ourselves. He says in verse 4, as he preaches it to himself, he says, these things I remember as I pour out my soul. These things I remember as I pour out my soul. What's he getting ready to do? He's getting ready to preach to himself. He's getting ready to talk to himself. He's having a conversation with himself in the presence of God. He wants to remember who God is. He's like, okay, wait, before I get irrational. Because I can tell you, when I've been in the valley of the shadow of death in life, I start to let my mind begins to not be my own. I let the committee take over, and I start to get irrational in my thought process. And David, as a man after God's own heart, knows where the water is found, and also knows that he can get irrational. Says, okay, you know what I need to do? I'm not just thirsty and needing to drink, but I got to preach to myself. And he says, you know what? These things I remember as I pour out my soul. Paul David Tripp says this about this. He says, preaching the gospel to yourself means consistently applying the truths of God's grace and power to your own thoughts and heart, especially in times of weakness and hardship. This is why God put the Psalms right in the middle of your Bible. They give us, when you don't have the words to preach to yourself, they will. In some of the worst times in my life, I've just sat down, even in my frustration and anger with God, like, where are you? And I've read the Psalms. I flood my bed with tears all day long. And I would read that and go, well, that's what I've been doing. I've been getting up at 2 a.m. every night in a panic. And I've been flooding the bed with my tears, wondering where you are, wondering what's going on. I'm like, God knows about this? I'm not the only one. God placed these things. It's because God is, shockingly for many of us in the room, we feel like he's so distant. He is right here amongst us. And he knows how we think. He knows how we feel. And he knows there's an enemy that has come to kill, steal, and to destroy us and take over the thoughts in our mind and make us go to those irrational places like, I'm not going to live, I'm going to die, I'm not going to make it out of this. I'm never going to, nobody can rescue me. I'm completely and utterly alone. But there's a louder voice that God has, and that's the process of preaching to yourself through hardship. It's not about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not saying, I can do this, I can do it, I'm good enough, smart enough, doggone it, Stuart Smalley. People like me. It's not about I can do this. It's about he has done this and he can do it again. He knows the valley of the shadow of death. And David's been there, literally physically been in the Kidron Valley when he was running from Saul. And now he's back and he's hiding from his own son. He's like, God's done it before. He's gotten me out of this before. He can do it again. And as he's preaching to himself, he recalls things that he, in the moment, didn't hold on to. But now that he's separated from them, he knows how much he loves it. He says, how I would go if I had the chance with the throng and lead the procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. He's like, man, I loved when I was part of leading worship. I love that I got to sing in unison with this group of people. I love that there's the word throngs in there because we don't use that one as much. Like that's not what it's a group. It's a large group. That's all a throng is. It's like I went to the football game. We had a whole throng there. It was great. I love that word too because it sounds like somebody. I've made a mistake in my life that I can't ever forget because friends don't let you ever forget anything. When we were getting married, I said, and I quote, "With this thring I thee wed." That was what I said. And I have many good friends, but one that's not a good friend, I literally for 30 years, every time I talk to him, his first words out of his mouth are usually, "Hey, I don't think you're even married." He's like, you didn't say it right. It just didn't happen. I mean, he calls me the Lord of the Thrings, dearie, beloved. I mean, he's always on me. But David remembers the church. And he remembers the beauty of being in the presence of God with the people of God. And I think sometimes we see this as a bolt-on, but David's now seeing it as a necessity. It's no longer a luxury for David. He's like, this is the food and the water that I need. This is a necessity to come into these places. That AME church down in District 9, one of the worst neighborhoods in Jacksonville, those people came in desperate. And you know what the pastor said to me too? He said, hey, we came in, the problems didn't go away. But we knew what we needed more than anything. We knew where the solution was. We knew who held the solution to our problems. And that's where we're going to spend our time. That's who we're going to shout out to. That's who we're going to trust in these moments. And it's going to change the perspective that we have in our mind when we walk out of here, even if the circumstance is still that way. And that's what David's experiencing. He's like, I needed to know that I was thirsty. I needed to know. Charles Spurgeon says this, and I didn't say this at 9, so you're welcome, 11. You get this. The next best thing to living in the light of the Lord's love is to be unhappy till we have it, and to pant hourly after it. You see, sometimes we have to be in that place to recognize what we need. We have to get to the place of dehydration to know that we're dehydrated. It has to go beyond a certain point. And I'm not saying that God has ill will towards you. But just like Charles Spurgeon says, God doesn't want you to have a lesser God. God doesn't want you to have the water that's not really water. He wants to lead you to the water. So when you're not there, unhappiness might be the very place you need to be because it's going to wake you up to the reality that you're dehydrated. Some of us can go a long, long time without water. In verse 5, as he's continuing to preach to himself, he says, why are you cast down, O my soul? Why is there this turmoil within me? Again, he's speaking to the irrational thoughts in his head that God's not there. And he immediately responds to him and says, hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. And then he says it again. Again, this is a song. My soul is cast down within me. Therefore, what am I going to do when my soul is downcast? I remember you. He's going to let his thoughts go to God's faithfulness in the land of Jordan, Hermon, and Mount Mizar. He just says, I'm going to remember when God was good, when he rescued me against my enemies, when he allowed me to go on these retreats, when he allowed me to see his beauty. I'm going to remember the goodness of God, that this isn't the end, that God is faithful, that he is going to meet me here in this valley. He goes on in verse 7, deep calls to deep at the roar of your waterfalls. All your breakers and your waves have gone over me. All that deep calls to deep means, I've always kind of wondered that. It's a term in Hebrew, when you kind of dig down into it, of relentless. It's like it's an unending something. It's something that keeps on pounding you, like keeps on washing over you. And then he goes on and gives the imagery, like a waterfall. If you've ever been under a little waterfall, you don't feel it. You think it's great because you can breathe. You get under a serious waterfall and you kind of get lost a little bit, you got to find a place where you can breathe, because the only place you can go is either down, with which you can't breathe underwater, or out of it. But when you're under it, it's relentless. And then waves. If anybody that surfs knows that you can, if you have ever surfed in Central America or the West Coast or Hawaii or somewhere, the relentless nature of Pacific surf is different. I remember surfing in Central America and with guys that were really good, and the plane landed, and our first day there, it was like 10 to 12 feet at 17 seconds. That doesn't mean much to everybody else, but those are really, really big waves. Like the face of the wave is in that 18 to 20 foot range, ceiling height, maybe a little bit taller. And as a mediocre surfer, I'm paddling out, asking my buddy who's like world class. He's so good at surfing, at least to me. Again, I'm medium at most things. And I'm paddling out. I was like, is this normal? He's like, no, this isn't normal. But then by the week, I started cruising along in the week. I started having fun. And I was at this one break. It was a long, long left. And I'm goofy-footed, which means I like to go left. And I remember getting on it and going. It was forever, like 250, 300-yard wave. Like, you just don't get that here on a beach break. It was a reef break. And I remember being on it, and I'm like, I got 8 turns on this thing. I thought I was good. I was like, well, I don't want to have to paddle all the way back out. This is already exhausting. I'm going to kick out early. Now, anybody that surfs knows on a reef break, you do not want to kick out early. But I didn't know any better. I kicked out early, which means you're still on the reef, and you haven't cleared the reef to get around and paddle out with ease. If you kick out early and the set's still coming of waves, you're going to get a relentless bunch of waves on the head. And when they're that big, it's not good. So I kicked out, I turn around, of course there's another wave that just dumps on me. And I'm thinking, okay, there can't be too many more of these. 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. And I'm talking about pinning me down on the reef, on the rocks below, all the way, not being able to swim to the surface barely. It's all the bubbles are coming up through the reef, so I couldn't get any leverage in, getting up there to get, and I was like, sucking in foam, and I just thought, I'm going to die. In the moment, I thought, I remember thinking, I cannot believe I'm going to die here. Started thinking about Beth. I was like, she is going to be so mad. She told me, I'm medium. You shouldn't be out there. I'm kidding. I knew she'd be. I was just like, your brain goes to that place of how relentless. And I just thought, oh, that's what David's experiencing. And then, and I think life can be that way. But David does something here, and the psalmist makes this turn. He says, deep calls to deep, and he says, at the roar of your waterfalls. Again, there's ownership of God. It's not just a waterfall that's relentless. It's not just a circumstance. It's his. Or all the breakers in your waves have gone over me. It's his relentlessness. What's he talking about? What kind of relentless thing is he talking about? Agreed, sometimes we need to take it on the head to know that we need to get our act straight, but it's really not what's happening here. Because you look at verse 8. What's relentless? He says, here's what's relentless. He's making the connection between waterfalls and these unrelenting waves to what? By day, the Lord commands his steadfast love. That's unrelenting. At night, his song is with me. He always is bringing me, even in the darkness of night, the song of joy, a prayer to the God of my life. He's saying that's what's relentless, is God's waves. His waterfall of his mercy and his grace. His steadfast love, his mercy, his grace, his healing, his goodness. It keeps coming. His faithfulness. It keeps coming. Not to mention, if you fast forward, and what's crazy about the valley of the shadow of death is that I think sometimes we think we want God to just eject us out of the valley. Isn't that what we want? It's like, please get me out of here. And unfortunately and fortunately for us, that's not really what God does. God is not the God that's like, hey, I'm going to get you out and I'll see you when you get here. Rather, he comes down to us and he walks us through the valley. In fact, what's amazing about the Kidron Valley is if you look just to the east of the Kidron Valley, you'll see up near the Mount of Olives is the Garden of Gethsemane. I mean, it's literally down almost in the valley. And if you don't know the Garden of Gethsemane, it's Jesus, not a full day, but hours before he would be arrested, he would be beaten, and by 9 o'clock he would be hanging on a cross. He was in the Garden of Gethsemane, crying out to God so similar to what David was doing. Saying, is there any way we could, sweating drops of blood. And by the time he got on the cross, you know what he cried out right before he died? If you wonder if there's a king that knows what you go through, he said, I thirst. I thirst. All he wanted was a drink. And he put himself in that position, not because of evil men, but because of the sovereignty of God. He did it for you and for me, to be the water of life, to reunite us with the creator of the universe, to pay the debt that we could never pay, to be the one that didn't eject us out of the valley, but the one that defeated the valley of graves, the one that defeated the tombs, the one that went down into the grave on your behalf, went into your grave, punched your ticket and said, I'm not just coming out of here by myself. They're coming with me. I paid the price. He did it for you and for me. And if you don't think he is the water, I'm telling you, just give it a try. You're here, aren't you? You're here for a reason. God brought you here for a reason. You might think you made the decision to come here, but God's sovereignty has led you all the way to streams of righteousness and goodness and his mercy and his grace here at Ocean City Church. Let's stand.